And welcome back to Fully Equipped. We're waiting for this one. We finished out the driver robot insights, I'd say about a month ago. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, go back and do that. We spent, I think, probably like an hour and a half, boys, going through all of the drivers for 2024, all of the robotic insights that Gene was able to glean from having the swing robot test all those different drivers. You can go check it out on the Fully Equipped YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to the Fully Equipped YouTube, do that. At Fully Equipped Golf on YouTube. You can go back and watch our ugly mugs talk about drivers, or you can just do it in podcast form on Spotify. Whatever. Anyway, so we're continuing the conversation today with fairways, specifically 3-woods and irons. I'm excited to do this because for a lot of golfers out there, we're a week away from the Masters. Hard to believe. RB is excited because I can see he's wearing a Masters hat. But we're getting into prime buying season right now for golfers. The golfers on the East Coast, particularly those Northeast, are coming out of hibernation. They're getting ready to buy. That's why I'm telling you, go back and listen to the Driver Insight pod in this one, because we're going to hopefully give you a little bit of a blueprint for what's out there. Maybe some gear that you say, oh man, that's my miss, or hey, I need more ball speed. That sounds like a really interesting product. And then you can go test it. That's all we're trying to do here. Just give you a blueprint. So we're going to get into that. But as always, before we get into doing that, boys, how we doing?
You're pretty good. Been a minute since I've been on.
I was going to say Serial Killer is back. Finally. We've missed you around these parts.
On the road, but I'm back.
Yes, you are. It's good to see you.
Gene's watching sunrises instead of sunsets today.
No, I was going to say Kris would be very excited right now. The Disney cruise ship just pulled up. And I was watching that dock right before we got on air. It's cool when the sun's coming up and the Disney ship's coming across the bay and pulling in the morning. Then you get a little Mickey Mouse horn that it has arrived. So it's pretty cool. Good morning.
And SpaceX rockets.
Oh my God. So yes. So 2 days ago, I was doing my bougie opera sunset thing, and I was like, God, how pretentious am I?
Just go back and listen to last week's pod if you want that one. It is so worth it. But
so
anyway,
for the listeners, I live on the 24th floor overlooking San Diego Bay. I've got a nice view of the Pacific Ocean in the distance. And the sunset was just glorious. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And there was all these like orange gradations as the sun was setting. And I thought, man, this one was good. This one was really good. So I went to get another glass of wine just to celebrate a little bit more. And I came back out and I was like, that is a weird looking contrail of an airplane. Like that airplane's going straight up in the air. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, that ain't no airplane. And sure enough, I zoomed in and it was a SpaceX launch. And
well, tell them how you can zoom in if you want to get even more bougie.
All right. So I have a periscope, Carl Zeiss periscope that was used on the Berlin Wall to spy into Eastern Germany during the Cold War.
Just the coolest shit ever in Gene's pad. Like it's just so awesome.
It's this amazing contraption that actually works but looks like an art piece. And it sits in my corner and I check out ships and all kinds of stuff. So I zoomed in with the Zeiss. And I could see the rocket separating within the cone as it was taking off. And it was just stunning. And then after it took off, I kept taking pictures and sending you guys the contrail as the winds would affect it. First, it was pretty linear. And then it started to get like squiggly in the sky, and the sky was turning purples and oranges. And yeah, it was a top 2 or 3 sunset. Let's put it that way.
I can't confirm that Gene does not have the Phil Mickelson Tyrannosaurus Rex skull, from what I think, unless he's got it hidden somewhere else. But there is not one of those hanging around.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. That was really cool.
Now, the interesting thing,
not as cool as 3 woods and 7 irons, but pretty cool.
I was gonna say, because I know we're gonna talk about 3-woods and 7-irons and all kinds of stuff, but the one thing we have to let viewers know is that if you're gonna have one of these clubs, the only way you're gonna hold on to it is with a grip. Now, Golf Pride has a whole bunch of options, but when we're talking putters, they actually have something completely new, and that is the reverse taper putter grip. Because what it does is it helps you better control the most important part of your putting stroke, and that is at impact. Because the reverse taper, which as the name suggests, has a slimmer upper hand and a larger lower hand. It uses a polyethylene plastic, plastic. So what it does is it actually allows these grips, which are oversized, to maintain a weight that is very much within a standard putter grip. So you can put these on, try all kinds of different putters with them, and it will not change the feel of the overall putter, because a lot of people are concerned they put these larger grips on, but you don't have to worry about that with this style of grip. And at the end, what it does is it helps you better control that moment to create a more square impact versus a traditional parallel style putter grip. So if you're curious to get and learn more about this, you can head over to golfpride.com. The pre-sale has already started, and they will be in stores April 15th, so the week of the Masters. Now, if you're curious about some shapes, there's a couple different options here. One is the round. It's a universally popular grip for almost all gripping types. So whether you're right hand low, use the claw, whatever you want to try, there's all kinds of options there. There's the pistol for truly the more classic style grip. It has a larger pistol style top hand, but it does still offer that reverse taper, which helps reduce grip tension in your lower hand to, again, help you better control the putter face. And then there's the flat, which is a more oval shaped parallel. I mean, they're all parallel design, but it's a slightly more oval shape. So what it does, it really helps with palm to palm putting strokes, or where your hands are closer together on the grip. They're also available in 2 different sizes, medium and large. And again, you can go to golfpride.com to check out the all new reverse taper. And if you stay tuned, we will have a couple little videos out on our YouTube channel as well describing these grips.
Yeah. Shout out to Golf Pride for coming back and being a sponsor of the podcast. They were the main sponsor for the pod last year, and it's always good to have them back in the fold for Fully Equipped. I did want to say they were kind enough to send me 3 of the reverse taper grips, and RB mentioned that the round medium is sort of the middle of the road grip, the universal grip that a lot of golfers can use. So here's the deal. If you were listening right now and you didn't just try and skip through the ad read, shoot us a DM at Fully Equipped Golf and let me know if you want this grip, and I will send it to you. So you can get a free one for your putter. It is the round medium. It's the middle of the road grip. It's going to fit your game. It's going to help you out, and it's free. So DM me, and I will get this out to you.
I have a second one that I'll add to that, because I've already put. Sorry, folks, you're not getting the pistol one. It's already on my putter. So
I was about to say RB probably already used the pistol.
But yeah, we got 2 of them. So let us know.
There we go. All right, 2. So first 2 people that claim the rounds, they're yours free, and we'll send them out. All right. As we mentioned, getting into 3-woods and 7-irons robotic testing, and let's kick things off, Gene, by asking the obvious question that I think golfers that are following our robotic testing insights are going to notice. We went from a highly detailed 9-point face mapping, which means that when the robot's hitting it 9 different points on the face and gathering data, that's 90% of the surface area that we're able to capture. And now we're going from 9 to 3. So we're going center and then 3/4 toe and then 3/4 heel. And now some golfers are going to wonder, like, why is it only just 3? Why aren't you trying to do more points on the face? What is the reasoning for just doing 3 on the 3-wood and the 7-iron?
Just hold a 3-wood up next to a driver and take a look at it.
I mean, I just need you to answer the question, and you just did.
It's physics, my friend. It's simple. It's simply surface area, and yes, you can go to some extra points. Like you could go, maybe an inch toe and an inch heel, and maybe like a 1/4 inch high. But what happens is, if you go the traditional route that you do with the driver, you start hitting off the club face, and you don't get any real data with that. The data becomes inconsistent, and you're popping balls up or driving them into the ground. And so those are in golf parlance, really bad mishits that they don't design for. They design for, solid contact across the face. So while you're probably not at the same level as a 9-point test on a driver, you're not that far off with 3 points because you're getting most of the surface area, and it's just simply due to the fact that the diameter of the golf ball is capturing the majority of the club face. And then you get into a situation with irons where, yes, there's more surface area up above, but unless you're hitting out of the rough, it's, or having once again a horrible mishit where you're digging that club in and say hitting really on the high toe. We generally do not test up there. We can occasionally, but we don't see a tremendous amount of differences between the clubs. Whatever they have at center toe and heel in these configurations usually will correspond high and low.
Yeah.
If someone hits it off the toe, as Kris would probably attest, they're probably going to hit the side of the fitting, or an inch off the toe, or off the heel. So yeah, that's a.
Well, to give you an idea, when we test, usually we test so that the bottom of the ball impact is on the second score line. And that's kind of an industry standard of where it's accepted. It's not the geometric center of the face because that's actually high. Now, you can hit that, especially on a par 3 if you're teeing your ball up a little bit. But for the most part, off the ground, that's where you're making your contact point, is that the bottom of the ball is on that second score line. So if you ever, put face tape on or even spray and hit some balls either off grass or mat, you'll see that your golf ball contact is usually kind of towards the lower third of an iron.
So I should also point out, when we mention 3 woods, we're talking about 15-degree 3 woods. So that's what we requested from the manufacturers. It's a pretty common loft that you're going to see. Anything stronger than that, you're getting into kind of more of that 2 wood range. And I did have some golfers reach out to me and ask, why do you not do 5 woods and 7 woods? Look, here's the deal. Like we're trying to do this testing in a way where we can capture very common clubs. And while 7 woods are becoming more common out on like the pro tours, and you see them in recreational golfers' bags, like 3 wood is a lot more common if you're going to look at a golfer's setup. So we're trying to pick that common fairway wood that makes the most sense. Anyway, all right. So let's get into it, Gene. So with drivers, we went through brands. I don't necessarily know if we want to just go blow by blow with each brand in their particular 3 wood. So why don't we just talk about what were the insights or the things that stood out from you on particular models during robotic testing?
Okay. Good question, Jay. Well, so let's start. So what I've done is I've broken down all of the models from different performance categories. And let's start with ball speed being one. Now, what's interesting about ball speed is this, and this is important to remember in the equation when you're looking at a 3 wood. And I always kind of present this, and I'd love to hear Kris's take on this. Are you using your 3 wood as a driver replacement, or are you using your 3 wood as a club in which you want to try to hold it green on a par 5 and get home in 2? Meaning, do you want a ball that spins more and lands softly, or do you want something that just runs as far as you can? Because these 3 woods are designed differently. Some of them have higher spin characteristics than others, and it's not this club's better than the other. It's this club was designed differently based on what the needs of the player are. So when I read these things like ball speed and launch angle and spin rate, it's not to think that one's necessarily better or worse than the other. It just had a different design parameter. So Kris, would you agree with that when you're, fitting? One of the questions is what is your goal with your 3 wood?
Yeah, 100%. That's part of the interview process when we're doing a woods fitting. Because, I mean, to your point, you have a group of players that essentially exclusively uses a 3-wood as another off the tee option. And then you also have that player that does kind of a blend of both. And then, there are some players that just care about being able to hit it off the turf. And if they can hit it off the turf, they can hit it off the tee. So, I mean, like me personally, when it comes to the 3-wood that I carry in my bag, that is predominantly used as an off the tee option for more placement and control on a tighter hole, a dog leg, something that has trouble, outside of that 280 number. And I'm looking for placement. I don't hit my 3-wood off of the turf or try to hit it into a green because I don't hit it high enough and I don't spin it enough. So I carry a 20-degree lofted fairway wood for that particular purpose.
Yep, makes complete sense. And so when I go through these numbers, it's important to kind of think about that in terms of what your goal is as far as your 3-wood. Now, the first category, if your goal is ball speed, I got your top 3. And they are starting at the lowest is the Paradigm AI Smoke Max at 136.8 miles an hour, followed by the STG at 137 miles an hour, pretty close. And then the QI10 Tour was the clear winner at 139.2. Now, what's interesting is, once again, these have corresponding descending launch angles. So the Smoke Max 14.7, the STG 14.2, and the QI10 Tour 13.1. And the spin rates 35.28 for the Smoke Max, 36.57 for the STG, and 31.02. So you'll remember that number in a second for the QI10 Tour. So the QI10 Tour is a rocket ship. It is a lower launching, and it is low spinning, and it has got the highest ball velocity. So now, if
Hey,
we
Gene,
go,
really quick
yes,
before you
yes.
go in, as you're kind of going off the top 3, just something I do want to point out is while there might be some differentiation between that QI10 Tour at 139.2 and the Mizuno, the STG at 137. I mean, 2 miles an hour. That's it's noticeable. If you look at the Paradigm like AI smoke products, that like their Max D, their Triple Diamond, and their smoke were all within like 136.8 to 136.5. So there is some bunching that goes on here, meaning like products you're not going to see like from one to the next as we're going through ball speed. There's not going to be 2 miles an hour. Like a lot of these products are tighter in terms of like what their ball speed is in relation to like the next one. There's not a very wide delta there.
Agreed. And in fairness, once again, like the lower ball speed models had the higher spin rates. So once again, It's not a function of, it's simple physics. If a ball is spinning more, it's not traveling in a velocity vector. So that's why I wanted to kind of qualify this beforehand. It's not that these products, so like the dark speed products, for example, they were a little lower on the ball speed, but they had really high spin rates. And so if you need to get the ball in the air, or you need control, or you're looking to hold a green, then those are the products to look at. If you're looking at a driver replacement where you just want the ball to run as far as possible, but also, to be honest, like the QI10 Tour, there's a reason that Tour is associated with that name. You're only launching at 13 degrees. So that is the lowest launching of the 3-woods, meaning you've got to bring some heat and some balls or some club head speed to get that ball in the air to make that work. And if you're swinging at 84 miles an hour and you think, oh, I want to maximize this, you've got to look at that really closely. And you're probably not going to end up in that product simply because it doesn't get the ball in the air enough for you to maximize the potential of it.
Hey, Kris, I got a question for you on the QI10 Tour, because looking at what's being used on tour right now, I've seen a lot more of the standard heads than I have of the tour heads. What have you been seeing during fittings, even for like say the better players and the faster players? Are they fitting into the tour, or have you been seeing them gravitate more towards that standard head?
I mean, it's kind of like Gene said, it's a launch and spin game. So for a player that's high launch, high spin, that has speed, that tour head is phenomenal. If it's the everyman, the QI10 core head for Fairway wood is really, really solid. And it has a good launch profile, good spin profile, and like we've referred to a few different products, it's kind of that cheeseburger that fits a ton of players out there. It has good spin characteristics. It's got good launch characteristics. It's still fast. It's faster than the Max. It's lower spinning than the Max, but it's substantially more forgiving and easier to hit for the majority of people than the tour head is.
Yeah.
You nailed it. That's exactly what it is, 100%. And
but the tour also has the 50 gram weight. We should point that out. So, I mean, if you do want to, increase launch, I mean, RB saw it when we tested, or when he tested the Stealth 2. I remember we were both out in Carlsbad, and his like spin delta when he was jamming that weight far forward and then all the way to the back. I mean, RB, what was it? I can't remember. It was
so we utilized the full 4 degrees of the sleeve as well as the weight, and we saw over like 2,000 RPM difference, which is kind of crazy. And I was gonna say, like, it points out like all these 3-woods on this list that we're talking about right now have, especially at least in the 3-wood models. I know some of the other Fairway models aren't, but they offer adjustability. So you can if you want to create something that's lower spinning, you can take less loft off, but you're going to lose the launch. So this is a good way to look at, if even to the same thing with like Kris's point about how like it fits. If you want to create more of a cheeseburger, you could add some loft and put the weight back in the tour of the QI10. So there are these adjustment tools, fitting tools that are built into these golf clubs that allow golfers to kind of fine tune. And it's the same thing with, as you mentioned a Cobra as an example, right? It's higher spinning, but it's higher launching. Well, yeah, you can take that same club, just like you've seen with tour players, and they lower the launch, and the next thing you know, you've got something that offers a bit more forgiveness, maybe more of a mid to lower spin still, but you start to lower launch. So it is. We take these numbers, and they're actually they're awesome because they create baselines for us to help with the customer fitting and just like better understanding it. But the fitting tools is the next step of this when a golfer's working with a fitter like Kris. I would say they don't work with me. It's just more me working with me. But the idea of adjusting how those things work, so when you go to the golf course, you can really kind of figure out what is going to be the ideal situation for you, or ideal club for you.
I'll tell you a little story. I've been working with Foresight on the GC Quad, and I was doing a test for them. Won't go totally into the details of the test, but it was a swing path test, and it was really interesting. We took a 10.5 degree driver and went 3 degrees outside in, so we had a negative angle of attack, club face was open, and then we hit it neutral, and then we did 3 degrees inside out. Here's the interesting part from an equipment standpoint. As you would expect, from a swing tip standpoint, going from outside in to square, we gained 15 yards of distance. So this is just squaring up the swing path and hitting it straight at 0 attack angle. And the beauty of the quad is you can get all of these club head delivery numbers, so you can dial this in perfectly. So we saw that. Then we went 3 degrees inside out with the 10.5, and our launch angle went up, but our spin rate stayed about the same, but our distance was about equal to the square. So we gained 15 yards from outside in to square, but then we kind of stalled out on inside out. Then what we did is I looked at the quad numbers and said, oh, wait a minute, that launch is too high for this inside out. So I took the head that was a 10.5, turned it down to 8, and gained another 15 yards of distance. So now instead of a net gain of 15 yards, you had a net gain of 30 yards. And the reason for the net gain of 30 yards was the adjustability. And you need a launch monitor like the quad, and you need someone like Kris who can look at that and identify that and say, hey, take a look at this. Now you've made a swing change when you come in, but you're still playing your same 10.5 lofted driver. If you turn that down or look at an 8-degree lofted driver, you're going to maximize and get your optimal launch conditions. So it really is critical to get with the fitter and to get with a good launch monitor like the GC Quad to get you good club head delivery to know what your options are.
There we go. All right. So we are going from ball speed to, well, let Gene. Gene's controlling the conversation here. Gene, where do you want to go next?
I want to go to launch angle. So launch angle. So this kind of ties into what we were talking about. Now, what I'm going to give you here is the lower 3 launch and the higher 3 launch. And I'm going to give you kind of corresponding spin rates so that now we're getting into the kind of the meat and potatoes of what are your specific considerations for a 3-wood. So let's start with the 3 lowest launching clubs. QI10 Tours, we already highlighted with ball speed, no surprise there. 13.1 on launch. Dark Speed LS from Cobra, 13.8. And the STG, once again, at 14.2. So all 3 very low launching, very low spinning. So from my perspective, great products for stronger players that launch it high, spin too much, and want to create more of that boring trajectory. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the Dark Speed Max at 16.3, the Dark Speed X at 16.4, and the G430 LST at 16.6. So we had some really high launching. Now, here was kind of the interesting one that kind of stood out to me, and that was the G430 LST. It was one of the highest launching. It was the highest launching, but its spin was mid to low. So it was a little bit of an exception in that it had a higher launching profile, but it didn't have the corresponding 42 to 4,500 spin that we saw with some of the other higher launching ones. So
that's really interesting. It was the highest launching, the LST was?
Yeah.
Huh.
But it was one of the lowest spinning.
High launch, low spin. That's usually a pretty good recipe for something.
Well, it's driver replacement.
I was about to say that's what I was going for. Is if you're somebody that struggles with driver, but still wants something that's long off the tee.
Yeah.
I mean, high launch, low spin. That's like a driver characteristics right there. So yeah, exactly. It could be a great driver.
I mean, to be fair, the Dark Speed X was very similar at 16.4 and 38, 36 as well. So, and the Paradigm Smoke Max, from a launch perspective, was at 14.7. It was kind of in the middle of the pack, but it was another one that had a really low. It had second to lowest, next or third lowest, but it was at 35.28. So there are some options out there that are getting the ball in the air and spinning less to create kind of a driver replacement option. All right, so we are going to go next to spin rate analysis. Once again, no surprise, the QI10 Tour is the lowest at 3102, followed by the Dark Speed LS at 3402, followed by the Paradigm AI Smoke Max that I just talked about at 3528. Now, what's interesting about the Smoke Max, though, is it had the highest launching of the lowest spin rates. And I know that can sound a little confusing, but the first 2 were more boring on a trajectory, and the Smoke Max was similar to the LST, which wasn't that far off. It was 5th and only 100 RPM off. So, these clubs are pretty close. The QI10 Tour kind of was one of the outliers, but all of those clubs have really good low spin, and you want to look at like the AI Smoke Max or the LST G430 as higher launching, lower spinning options. And then on the higher end, we had the QI10, which Kris called the cheeseburger of 3 woods, which I totally agree with. The dark speed, so that was 44.69. The dark speed max 45.36, and the QI10 max 46.23. All of them on the higher end as far as launch. So they're kind of more traditional as you would expect, launching higher and spinning a little bit more. So for a player that has a tough time getting the ball in the air and needs that spin for lift, those are definitely three to look at.
Why don't we go from here into an area I think a lot of golfers are curious about, which is dispersion and consistency. I mean, this is what you're probably going to be looking for in a driver, but you're most likely going to be looking for in a 3-wood as well.
You got it. All right. So let me go and talk about some of the clubs that stood out to me. First off, the Callaway Paradigm, both the AI Smoke and the AI Smoke Max D had equal drop off on toe and heel. Good dispersion patterns, but equal drop off. That is really important if you miss all over the face and you're inconsistent. For example, just as a comparison, the AI Smoke Triple Diamond had a 5-yard greater drop off on toe than heel. So most of the players that are playing the Triple Diamond aren't missing out on the toe. They're coming from the inside. If they're missed, it's heel oriented. And shocker, their heel dispersion was twice as tight as their toe dispersion. So understand, if you're looking at a club like the Triple Diamond to lower your spin, beware if your miss is a toe shot, because you probably will get penalized for that. On the opposite side of that, we saw with the Cobra Dark Speed LS, exceptional drop off on the toe. It was 2.7. It was one of the best, but because it had great drop off on the toe, its heel drop off was 14 yards. So once again, if you miss on the toe, that's definitely a club to look at. It also had good dispersion numbers. Now, another one in the same family, the Cobra Dark Speed Max, 7.7. Not quite as good as the LS, but still really solid. And it had some of the best, it had really good accuracy numbers as well. The kind of solid all around, and it's come up in some of these categories already, without a doubt, is this Mizuno STG. It had the tightest dispersion that we saw and an equal or almost equal drop off toe and heel. So a really, really solid club as far as drop off. It, once again, as you remember, had the second best ball speed, and it had the third lowest spin rate. So it was a really interesting club in that overall its performance characteristics were very, very solid.
It's the most pleasant surprise, I would say. And
Yes.
I know we're going to discuss those at the end of when we wrap 3-woods, but yeah, that STG keeps popping up.
Can't sleep on Mizuno Fairway woods anymore.
Well, you can't. And you're exactly right. I mean, we've been waiting for them to come out with some strong wood products, and they've been putting a lot more money into the R&D process, into the materials. And this one in particular, I feel like they finally it's popping.
It's definitely one to take a look at. And I in doing this analysis, I kept going, oh, there's the STG again. Oh, there's the STG, when running through these categories. So it was interesting. The other ones that we saw that were really interesting, the PXG 311, excellent dispersion, some of the best dispersion, 4.8 yards on the toe, 3.1 on the heel, basically dead straight, and equal drop off on toe and heel.
I think it was the best, Gene, wasn't it? As far as if we're talking about like the most accurate between heel and toe, it was
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, it and the STG were both, in fact, it bested the STG in drop off and let me just quick numbers. Yeah, and it bested it in dispersion. So it was an exceptional product for both drop off and distance and accuracy. And to finish up, this is kind of interesting. Heel drop off on TaylorMade products. Now, this shows you that not all products are designed the same. To give you an idea, TaylorMade on their game improvement and their standard products really focused this year on heel. So the QI10 had a 6.3 yard drop off on carry. The QI10 Max had a 0.8 yard drop off. It was exceptional. Now, if you go to the Tour, it had a 17 yard drop off. So the Tour is completely flipped from the other two as from a performance characteristic standpoint. So you really want to look. There's kind of, and Kris, I'm going to have you weigh in here, but from my perspective, the way that I look at it is it's first launch and spin, and they're interconnected, and then it's drop off and distance, or i.e. miss, is kind of the third characteristic, and then obviously there's got to be a directional characteristic. How would you prioritize when someone walks in for a 3-wood? What's the ladder that you're looking at as far as trying to fit them?
So I typically will go launch, spin, dispersion. And I mean, looking at just TaylorMade specific, because that's what you were just touching on, the footprint between those three heads. Like, you put the Tour head down next to the Max, and I mean, there's a substantial difference in how those clubs sit on the ground and the footprint that they have, just the overall size of those two heads side by side. And then the core head fits right in the middle. And we had talked about on previous pods that, I mean, these are three very different heads with very different characteristics, which is great for us in a fitting environment because it gives us more tools to work with and more differentiation between each product. And that Max head being so stable, it really falls in line with what they were able to achieve in the driver. So, I mean, if you have a player that struggles with consistency on the face, that struggles with launch and spin, the Max head's one of the first products that I'm pulling, just because it's so easy to get in the air and it's extremely stable from toe to heel as far as the miss hit across the face. Whereas the Tour, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of consistency, but if you are a player that has speed and has good ball striking, that Tour is really tough to beat. So player demographics, I wouldn't consider the same player for any of those heads. So I'm looking specifically at a certain characteristics and demographic of player to categorize which head they're going to fall into as far as playability goes.
And I think that separation too, like it helps golfers. And look, we understand, I get messages all the time. It's like, I'm stuck between two models. So we see this less this year, I think, because there is so much more differentiation. But you get the question of, I can't go see a fitter. I can't find a fitter. I don't have like the option to go see a fitter. I'm going to spend half a day or a full day to go out and like find a fitter to get fit and go through the proper process. So like, what do you recommend? And this is where this kind of data and this kind of separation that they include in these models makes it easier for golfers to make that decision and make it more confidently. I think that's the biggest thing. And so for those golfers who are out there and they're really curious about which one they can go with, like understanding, just, it sounds so silly, but like if you go to the range and you got your 3-wood, you're like first spray your club face, find out where you're actually hitting it on the club face, and then just hit 20 balls and like track where you're missing them, right? Whether it be on the club face and also from a dispersion perspective. And this, with this information that we've got with Gene, allows us to take that and say, you can go to a store or go to your pro if you're going to just order online, wherever it happens to be. People online shop all the time now. Which you can do at fairwayjockey.com as well. So you can do that and you can say, okay, this is what I should be looking at. And this is the one that's probably going to work best for me, because that is what this information is really. Not only does it provide Kris with information and fitters with information, but it also allows you, the golfer out there who's listening to this, to say, take some responsibility and of like looking at what you have and then trying to, if you are looking for improvement, where to find it. And that's, I think, is really where these numbers are so important when we talk about the misses and all these different things and how these golf clubs are categorized.
And, you know, to follow up on RB's point, our goal here, and also to kind of add to Kris's point, if you don't have the luxury of getting fit, one of the most intimidating things when you walk into a golf store is to look at the sheer number of products, and you're overwhelmed. And even if you are an avid, you know, consumer of media, you don't know the difference between a PYZ and an XTK, and, you know, and all of this like nomenclature, marketing, you know, fire hose of information. And we want to be able to provide you with some really solid data that allows you to pick three, because unless you're a flat body, you're not going to be hitting more than three. After three, your back's going to start to get sore. You start to get worn down. So we want to give you three and get you in the right direction. And if we can do that, and then you're going to decide, I can tell you this is the best club for dispersion, hands down, based upon data that it's really tough to refute. But if you don't like the looks of it, it doesn't matter. You have to like, and that's where the beauty of blending data with subjective kind of testing of humans. Every human is different. Some like a different top line, some like a longer face, some like a shorter face. And so we just want to get you to three and get you in the right direction. And then from there, you make the decision. As RB said, you've got to take some ownership in this. And it's ultimately what feels good in your hand, because what's between your 2 ears, i.e. the confidence when you're standing over that club. And it's so critical when you hit that first bad shot, you want to be able to say, that was me, that wasn't the club. And if you can do that based upon the information that we've given you, we've done our job. And you can now go enjoy or be as miserable as you want on the golf course. That's ultimately your choice.
And Gene, you used a term that I'm not familiar with. If you could clarify a little bit, because I'm sure if I have the question, other people. You said flat body. If you could elaborate on that. It's just nothing that I don't really know what you mean by that, Gene.
It's an aspiration that is quickly disappearing. Let's just put it that way. The mirror is a cruel mistress every morning. And I'm like, I think I can get there. I think I can get back. I think I can get back. But it's just fading away.
It's the wine and cheese and sunsets.
Yeah, wine and cheese isn't helping much. That's for damn sure.
More wine than the cheese.
Yes, fair point.
Okay, so before we wrap 3 woods and transition into 7 irons, what's the one product, having now looked at some of these superlatives for the 3 woods, what's the one product that impressed you the most? I want an answer from everybody. None of them. Cool. Okay, on to 7 irons.
No, I'll go first. I mean, right. I'd already kind of talked about it earlier in the discussion. What I'm seeing in the bays for the majority of people out there, the QI10 core head has been really, really solid in the fairway wood category. And I mean, that's going anywhere between tour players and some of the amateur players and collegiate players and even the higher handicap players that I work with come in, and QI10 has been really, really successful for us.
I'm a big fan of and it's mostly because of like personal preference, just because what I've tested so far. I really like the Cobra LS, smaller shape, really hot. My misses correlate with what the data shows for what works well for me. So that, I mean, kind of explains why that lines up so well. And then the other one would be the tour, the TaylorMade tour, because again, they took the Stealth 2, which was a very good product, and they looked at it and they said, okay, what are the ways that we could kind of create a better option here? And they've shallowed out the head, or they've shallowed out the weight port. They've changed the shape of the head. They've offered the same amount of adjustability, and as you know, as the that shows it's a little rocket. And I think that is what, when golfers are looking for something and they're trying to figure out, like, you could build this little rocket and then you still have 2 degrees of adjustability. You can make yourself a little strong 2-wood. You can make yourself a little 4-wood. It gives you that option that is very unique, because there isn't a club that offers that much single weight adjustability. There is clubs that have adjustability, like, again, example, the PXG has like the weights in the heel toe and in the back of the 3-wood. And I'm trying to think of another one that has like such large, the Cobra as well. Cobra has the adjustability too. But to take 50 grams and go forward and back in a head that weighs 215 grams or 214 grams, that's pretty good. And that's gonna create some performance adjustability.
For me, it's a grab bag because of all the things we've talked about, and I agree with both of your assessments. Both of those clubs are great. For me, just on a pure data standpoint, the PXG 311, just overall performance wise, if you want a solid club that's going to hit it straight and when you miss hit it, not get penalized, and the 1A would be the Mizuno STG. They both were kind of at the top of their class as far as equal weighting, and great performance characteristics. But that being said, the beauty of this is that's just a data standpoint based upon those 2 metrics. If you're a consistent ball striker and you don't have to worry about so much off-center hits, and you're looking for launch and spin, look at some of the other options that we had. But those are the 2 that really jumped out to me as kind of top of the class in an overall category.
I'll pick 2, even though I asked you all to pick 1. And I'll go with the Ping G430 LST. As we already mentioned, it was high launch, low spin. There's possibly another driver replacement that's going to be dropping very, very soon from TaylorMade. RB posted some pictures on social media. Maybe a new burner mini coming out in the not too distant future. So I think, especially for golfers, for whatever reason, some golfers struggle with the longer length of a driver, being able to square up the face, and going to a 3-wood sometimes is what they really need. And look, if you can get high launch and low spin out of a 3-wood, I think it's a really great secondary option off the tee. And then the Mizuno, the STG, I think they absolutely nailed this one. It is second in ball speed, as Gene mentioned, and was right there in terms of consistency on heel and toe misses. I think they absolutely nailed that 3-wood. So those are my 2 picks. All right. From 3-woods to 7-irons. And I guess before we dive in, Gene, the obvious question here is why pick a 7-iron versus a 6-iron versus an 8-iron? What's the reasoning here for why we test with a 7?
I'm going to throw that to Kris. And Kris, maybe you can speak of this, because it used to be the 6-iron. Well, years ago, it was the 5-iron, and it's gradually gone up to the 6, and now it's the 7. But this is purely due to the fact that this is the industry has kind of moved in this direction as to, from an iron standpoint, this is the club that you test to see. So, Kris, maybe you can elaborate on that.
It's kind of picking up on the path that you were going down. It's set composition. So, you have more and more options for players out there in the higher lofted fairway wood category, in the hybrid category. And as irons are getting stronger lofted and more difficult for players to get the appropriate launch and spin characteristics out of, you're seeing more and more players forego the long iron. So 7-iron is typically still going to be present in the majority of players' bags. So it's an iron that gives you a good representation of launch and spin, and it's an iron that the majority of players out there can hit with some level of comfort and also have some confidence in. So it's a good middle of the road iron to give you some launch and spin characteristics, and kind of acts as that blend between, okay, if I can hit a 7-iron, you can usually make an educated assessment that the 6-iron, the 5-iron are going to be somewhat easy to hit if the 7-iron launch parameters are correct.
All right. Well, we did test a wide variety of 7-irons. I mean, everything from muscleback blades all the way to, bordering on that super game improvement category. And so you're gonna obviously get a wide range of superlatives, which I actually like. So, Gene, where do you want to start? Kind of similar to 3 woods. Let's try and hit some superlative categories here in the iron space.
Sure. We'll start with launch and spin. Now, remember, like 3 woods, so much of this is a function of how you swing. And if you are a strong player who has a really steep angle of attack, meaning a negative angle of attack, and you de-loft dramatically, there is a direct correlation. Usually you are a much better player, and those much better player irons are the higher launching of them. If you have kind of a shallower, more neutral angle of attack of kind of a mid to high handicap player, they're much more lower launching. And shocker, they're also built with a lot of game improvement qualities to them, and they're trying to get the ball as far as possible because usually you've got slower swinging players as well. So when listening to these numbers, kind of keep that in mind. For example, we're going to get to some of the highest launching irons. They have the lowest ball speeds. Well, the reason they have the lowest ball speeds is because they're the highest launching at a neutral setting compared to everything else. But for that player who's hitting down on the ball and de-lofting the ball, they can really optimize their ball speed for that. So it's not once again, this isn't a ranking like this is the best to the worst. It's showing you what the differences are in launch and spin and ball speed for these specific products. And then you have to make the decision of what type of player you are in order to want to test. If you're a really good stick and you hit the ball low and you have a steep angle of attack, don't even come close to the lower launching products. They're going to be nightmares for you. And vice versa. If you, need distance, you probably don't want to look at the forged products because you're going to probably lose 10 to 15 yards in distance just simply due to the loft angle and the fact that you don't hit down on it enough, and you're just going to have these balloon balls. So that being said, now I'm going to go through a little bit here on the range just to let you know, and this is kind of interesting and wild. So just going from launch angle, our lowest on the launch angle was 17 degrees, and our highest on the launch angle was 21 degrees. So we had a 4-degree separation with 7-irons, which is pretty substantial. But what's interesting is when you get into like musclebacks, for example, the deltas tighten up to within a degree or so. So you go through these categories as you're looking at like launch and spin. So the lowest launching of the three were the Paradigm X, the T400, and the 311 XP Gen 6 at 17, 17.2, and 17.2. The highest launching were the 620 Ford CB at 21.3, 620 Ford MB at 21.3, and the P7 MB at 21.4. So you're talking a tenth of a degree, which is within the rounding area. You can basically say all of those. But if you go back 10 up the list, the King MB was 20.7. It still was within 0.7 of a degree of the highest launching. So all of the clubs in the higher launching area were definitely players' irons, as opposed to the lower launching clubs were all in the game improvement category. And then as far as spin is concerned, no shocker there. The 311 XP Gen 6 at 4460, T400 at 4734, and then the ZX4 MK2 was at 49.84. Those also were the top. Well, the ZX4 MK2 was the fourth lowest launching, but there was a direct correlation between, if you look at this data, low launching and low spinning. Same thing on the opposite end. The third best was a P7MB at 67.97, 624 CB once again at 69.27, and 624 MB at 74.73. Now it definitely, that muscle back really spun a lot, and it was also one of the highest launching.
Yeah, but you're looking for workability in I mean that's more of a
100%.
consistency. Yeah, you're not looking for distance. And the guys that are playing those that are upgrading to an MB, they've been playing MBs before. They know their numbers. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
They're looking for control. They've already got their distance.
Yep.
But what's interesting about it is how bunched up they really are, but for example, the MB is a little bit interesting in that it spun 500 RPM higher than the CB, which was right behind it. So it definitely stood out from a spin standpoint. And, just as an interesting comparison, kind of like the launch angle, if you compare it to that 311 XP Gen 6, it spun 3,000 RPM more, just to show you what the range is. So there is a huge range of these clubs to show you the kind of options that you have so you've got 4 degrees on launch and 3,000 RPM on spin that you can play with, within the 2024 models.
This is where, when we talk about all 7 irons aren't created equal, and I know I'm thankful that the OEMs don't do it anymore, but there used to be a few commercials where you'd see like one of the tour players or somebody, and they're like, "Man, I hit that 47 yards further with that 6 iron." So, well, yeah, man, it's got 7 degrees less loft. It's got half an inch longer shaft. It's got a lighter shaft because it's a stock product, and you swing your freaking 6 iron at 104 miles an hour. Like, yeah, no crap, dude. Like, what do you expect? Like, you're not hitting a 6. I mean, you're not hitting you're hitting the 7 iron effectively, your 6 iron, whatever it is, but you're effectively hitting your 4 iron or like 4.5 iron. Like, this is where the example, or when people talk about like fitting into demographics, it's the perfect thing of like high spin, go to low spin. If you are a low spin player, or you de-lofted, or you're someone who creates low dynamic loft and low spin loft with your iron, so you're de-lofting, but you're not super steep, you're kind of shallow, and you're tightening your spin loft window. There you go. There's your physics nerdy club fitting thing for the day. Go look that up online. But you put all of those things together, and it's like now you've got the ability to like fine tune what's going to work, because there's a reason a really fast player who hits it high, like Rory, can play a blade and uses a blade. But if you were to give that same guy, and I'm not picking on the iron, it's just because it's who it's designed for, but like you give them a QI10, that thing is going to go it's going to go higher, even though it's got less loft because of the technology involved with it, but it's going to spin so little that, like, yeah, Rory's going to hit the 4 iron 250 freaking yards. It doesn't mean that it's useful. It just means that he's going to hit it that far. So I love the amount of variance in this category because of the loft, because of the design, because of the offset. It's also, to your point, I think when people, and I'm sure you got all of you guys get the questions from a fitting perspective, is like, I'm kind of stuck between like these 3 irons. And it's like, look, I got 4 sets of irons that I can go to like right now, and they all perform almost exactly the same. The 7 irons all go roughly the same distance. I'm not that good anyway, so it doesn't matter. But they all go roughly the same distance. The 4 irons go all the same distance. The dispersion is all good. I built them all. They all have kind of the same shafts in them, or the same shafts. Like, yeah, they all perform the same. Like, you're just picking something that looks good, which is exactly a Gene's. See, I'm pointing, and for people on video here, I don't know which direction Gene is when we do the edit, so I'm just gonna like start doing this. But it's exactly why,
like the Brady Bunch,
Gene's point, that it's so important to, when you are looking at a club, is like, yeah, if you've got it sorted down to like 3 clubs and you can't really decide, pick the one that you like the best, because that will provide you the confidence at the end of the day that when you are standing over a shot on a par 3 or on a shot over water or whatever it happens to be, a tuck pin, you're going to make a good swing, because you know that breakdown in like of the filter that you got to those like 2 or 3 clubs, the one that you picked is the one that you love the most, and you should love your golf clubs as much as anything, not anything in your life. Let's be very clear about that. You should love your golf clubs to be confident to know that you can make good swings with them.
I would also state that one of the things that I've found that's really interesting is you're smoking the ball. Everything's great on this club. It feels good. Try to hit one off the toe. See what it feels like. And, because get that sense of that miss hit, and can you live with that miss hit? And if you feel good with that miss hit, then, you've got something solid, and you should game it at that point.
What were the best irons for dispersion then, Gene? What kind of came out of the testing?
So that's where I was going to get to next. So the first category that I wanted to talk about, RB, was drop off in distance, and not surprising, the best drop off in distance were the game improvement clubs, and it's once again most irons. Not all, but most irons, the toe drops off more than the heel. The weight is towards the heel. But when you get into players' irons categories, that becomes extreme. And for example, there is this Mizuno Pro 241 7 iron, 1.1 yards drop off on heel hits. I mean, it went the same direction. The G430 the Ping I230, 1.1 yards drop off on heel hits. There are the Mizuno JPX 923 Tour, 0.8 yards drop off on heel hits. So there are exceptional clubs that are heel weighted. The numbers when you go to the toe, though, they're 10 or 15 yards because of that. So what I want to kind of highlight here for the mere mortals is some of the best kind of equal drop-off. So if you miss toe or heel, and interestingly enough, the best drop-off on toe hits was the Callaway Paradigm AI Smoke Max Fast. And it actually had a less drop-off, 8 yards on toe versus 12.2 on heel. The Cleveland Zipcore XL, 7.5 on toe. So I stand corrected there. That was slightly better, and 9.2 on heel. Another one that was excellent, the Cobra Air X Ultralight, 8.5 on toe, 10.9 on heel. So these clubs were really balanced on a toe and heel standpoint. The G7 Ping G730 had a really exceptional toe and heel drop off, 9.8 and 3.3. So
that one in particular, Gene, when looking at toe and heel, one of the best on heel, one of the best drop offs on heel, but also it beat the average on toe.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of only 2 or 3 irons that had a single digit drop off on toe and heel.
Yes.
Which is great for if you're inconsistent with your contact, you're not somebody who's hitting it out of the toe or out of the heel. That's a great iron.
Yep.
So anyway, just wanted to point that out.
Yep. 100%. And to follow that up, the Cobra King Forge Tech, because I already screwed that up before the call and called it by its acronym. Another exceptional product, 9.4 yards drop off on the toe, 6.4 yards drop off on the heel. So really, really solid. And to follow up last but not least, which I think was a really good one to look at, is the Callaway Paradigm, 7.6 on the toe, 6.8 on the heel. Almost balanced as far as those two are concerned.
And it's also really fast.
And it's really fast too. Yes, 100%. Now, as far as offline is concerned, RB, here's where, how best to describe it? All of these were really good. None of them like stood out. But some of them, the challenge here is just to give you an idea. So we hit 3/4 of an inch toe and heel. The widest off center was about 8 or 9 yards as far as a miss was concerned. But some of them, like the one that stands out, the G430, that had a 1.5 yard drop off or dispersion on toe and a 0.7 yard dispersion on heel. And
That's so straight.
the same thing with the I-230. They were both dead straight. Now, just trying to look here to see some of the other ones. They all were. Everybody makes a good club when it comes to dispersion, though. You don't see
You're not going to see the wider dispersions like you would with, say, a driver. Once you get in, is what you're saying with an iron.
Yes.
It's not going to be as noticeable.
And Kris, maybe you can speak to this from a fitting standpoint, because we hit everything neutral with the robot. Talk about directional tendencies with these clubs and built-in, face angle at address, offset, etc. for, kind of being able to fit to a directional bias, in regard to these products.
I mean, there's a variety of different components at play there. So, a lot of people are unaware of the fact that as you get into some of the more forgiving game improvement multi-material irons, the hollow cavity irons, the big perimeter weighted irons, that there's actually a gear effect at play in an iron. So hitting it off the toe, off the heel, high on the face, low on the face, you do have some of the gear effect kind of characteristics at play like you would see in metalwoods. Excuse me. And you also have some discretionary weight that's positioned towards the toe, towards the heel. They're using the polymers and elastomers inside of the head in addition to tungsten. I mean, Cobra started using 3D printed materials in some of their irons a few years back. And then you also have offset. And you take a look at all of these different variables as far as how they're employing them in the head designs. You'll have heads that are fade biased, draw biased, higher launching, lower launching, higher spinning, lower spinning. So, I mean, that kind of emphasizes the importance of being able to get fit and do some testing to where you can maximize the possibility of finding something that matches what it is that you do in your swing naturally. So, like we've kind of touched on, being a toe striker or a heel striker, a slicer, the fader of the golf ball, whatever the case may be, in a fitting environment, we'll pull 3 or 4 different head designs that on paper work for that particular player. But something that I train our fitters to understand is there's no way to account for the human element when it comes to look, sound, feel. So everybody's visual perception of a shape, everybody's acoustic and auditory feedback of how a club sounds at impact is going to be different. And so many players associate feel with sound. So, I mean, it might be great numerically, but if you hate the way it looks, if you hate the way it feels off the face, or if you just don't like the way it sounds at impact, the confidence level to consistently play it well isn't going to be there. So that's where you can have all of the data in the world, but it also has to check the box on that player side of their personal preferences and what it is that they like as far as the visual presentation goes. So that's fitting and testing is, as RB will kind of attest to, is a very important part of club selection, as that human element is something that is always a constant changing variable.
For sure. All right. Well, Gene, unless you have anything else on irons, let's wrap it by doing the same thing we did with 3 woods. What's the one product from Robotic that impressed you the most?
So for me, without a doubt, they're so close. That's the challenge that I think But I'd have to give the nod to the Cobra King Forge Tech and also the Callaway Paradigm. They both were just rock solid as far as draw. And I'm looking, once again, and also that, but man, that Ping G730, it was kind of a three-way tie.
You asked Gene to pick one, and he's like picking every iron.
It's
If
like-
you
it's
just
like
if you just let him go, if we let him go, he would pick every iron. He'd have a reason.
It's like trying to pick your favorite kid. I mean, come on, you can't do that. But it's they all were exceptional. And once again, I'm looking at this through my prism of an average golfer. I'm not looking at this through the prism of an elite golfer or, for that regard, a high handicap golfer. Just kind of like what I would look at to potentially game for myself. It ultimately is up to the listener, reader, etc., to kind of mine this and see what their characteristics are and what clubs could potentially benefit them.
I'm going to go off the board here. Well, not off the board. It's on the board because it performed well. I think they do not get enough credit for their iron designs, and that is the Cleveland XL Zipcore.
Zipcore, yeah.
Yeah, it tested really well.
From a price point perspective, it's one of the least. It's one of the most cost-effective irons on the market that's on any of these lists, which I think is important to note. I've hit them. We got Jonathan and I got photo sample. I think Jonathan got right-handed photo sample, so I don't know if he's actually hit them. But they feel really good. They look really good. It's an oversized iron. It says XL in the freaking name. But when you consider the price point that it's at and the performance that it delivers, it is one of the best values that is out there. And I think when golfers are looking for the option, you can go to any of the ones that we mentioned here. You can go to any of the, Cleveland is a major OEM, but you think of the ones that are maybe more out, more in your face when it comes to marketing, whoever it happens to be. But the Cleveland stacks up. It really does stack up. And I think for golfers who are those mid handicaps and they're maybe looking at different hollow body irons or something, the Cleveland is it's a pretty, I don't want to say simple, but it's a very it's a standard looking cavity back iron, but it has a lot there that's really working for
cheeseburger.
it.
The word is cheeseburger. Yeah, that's
a great cheeseburger. And I could go and like Gene, I could sit here and literally rationalize why every single iron is a great iron on this list because I've hit a bunch of them. They all perform very well. I know what performs really well for me, and I know generally my opinion gravitates towards stuff like that. But just from the data perspective, from a performance perspective, from what I've seen holding these clubs, I think they are very, very good. Now, from a distance and dispersion perspective, the pin kicks butt. It's so cool. But I think if golfers are looking for something and they're curious to say, hey, what should I try? Do not walk past an XL Cleveland Zipcore without giving it a shot. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Serial killer.
I'm kind of in Gene's camp. It's so hard to pick one. I could go down and
guys,
pick one in each category.
I wanted to stick to one.
What's straddling the fence? Pick a damn iron.
It's not. There's different categories, so I like different irons from different categories. I mean,
I'm a 12 handicap that swings at 85 miles an hour with my 6 iron. What's the top one you're in? And I'm let's say I'm a little steep. I'm a little cutty. What are you going with? Come on, Kris, give it to me.
Oh, like I said, I'm picking 3 or 4. But I mean, if I have to narrow down one, I really like that Forge Tech. And that is a sleeper in the drawer that I pull for players, and they hit it and they go, "Oh wow, I never would have thought about that." And kind of like you said, RB, with the Cleveland. I mean, this year there is such a good variety of product out there that can work for so many different players. But if I have to pick one, if you're holding my feet to the fire here, I'm going to go Forge Tech, as I've seen that thing work for a huge amount of players. And then it's always that, oh, wow, I never would have thought of that.
And I think I just want to chime in on a pat on the back to all of us. One of the keys to the amount of information that you get at golf.com through Fully Equipped, through True Spec, through this amazing team that I've been privileged to be a part of is we don't award best of best. We don't hang something and say, congratulations, because all that is a mean average on a bell curve. That means that, it was the most popular, but guess what? There's a big bell curve and you're somewhere on that bell curve, and chances are you're not exactly in the mean average. And that's why these things are always painstaking. And we're going through all of this is because we realize that every golfer is different, and we want to be able to provide as much information for your specific swing and not just give you a best of the best that you go run out like a lemming right over the cliff to, try something. We want to try to dial in your game. Ideally, you want a launch monitor and an expert fitter, but if you don't have those as options, we're going to give you the next best thing and try to give you as much information as possible. And I think, all of us consume a lot of golf media, and it's just, it's kind of the default standard is, and I understand why everybody wants the best of the best, but not everybody swings the same. So it's kind of a wasted accolade. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything because it might not be beneficial for your game. And chances are it's not, because it's a big bell curve and they just took the midpoint. So anyways, that's the self-promotion rant. I'm going to let it go from there.
All right. And last for me would be the G730. It was top 5 in ball speed, had one of the tightest deltas when looking at the heel and toe drop off. It was one of 3, I went back to look, that had single digit drop offs on heel and toe. So I think it's a really good iron. No surprise that Ping's coming out with a great game improvement iron. This one also has a really clean profile. Even though it's game improvement, it doesn't have a lot of offset. So I think it checks a lot of boxes for those mid handicappers that don't want to play a shovel, but really don't know their miss quite yet. I think it's a great club for inconsistent golfers. And boys, with that, I think we're wrapping up 3-wood and 7-iron robotic insights. It was a lot of fun. The driver one was a lot of fun. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to go with this one because there's just so many products out there, but I feel like we hit a lot of the high points for both categories. And again, all we're doing with these podcasts is just trying to inform, make it easier as the Masters rolls around and we get into some springtime weather and everybody starts to get back out on the golf course and they look through their bag and maybe they want to add some new gear. That's all we're trying to do. Just offer up some insights to help make your testing and your fitting experience a bit more enjoyable. And with that, let's close out episode 235 of Fully Equipped. As always, man, we're everywhere now. I love it. If you want to ask us a question, gear-related or not, there is the Fully Equipped hotline. That phone number is 602-935-4974. Again, 602-935-4974. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. You can like and subscribe. It's okay. You can do it. We're at Fully Equipped Golf on YouTube, also at Fully Equipped Golf on Instagram, and at Fully_Equipped on Twitter. Thanks as always for listening. It's almost Masters Week. We'll see you around.